Welcome in Chicago. You have found your way to Chi-Town Weekly here on IE Sports Radio, your direct feed for all that is sports. This is going to be a wild show tonight. The lead story, if you hadn't already guessed, was certainly going to be the fallout from the hazing scandal at Northwestern University, and it just keeps changing by the hour. We will get you caught up and up to date on everything happening up in Evanston, get you caught up on the story there, what the university originally did, what the university is now doing, what might be happening next, everything going on there. That's not going to be all we're going to talk about, though, as that's going to be a very heavy, hard story to get through. We'll try and lighten things up by taking a look at both baseball teams in town now that we have successfully made it to the All-Star break. And then also, it is Realignment Week here at IE Sports Radio. We have some maps that have redrawn up all the major U.S. sports leagues from the NFL to MLB to NBA, NHL, even major college sports are in there. We will be discussing those and having some fun there. Lots to get through tonight. Buckle it up. This is going to be a wild ride of a show. And hello and good evening, everyone. I am your host, Adam Karnick, here on Chi-Town Weekly, part of IE Sports Radio, your direct feed for all that is sports. We have got a lot to get through in tonight's episode. We're going to start things off with an abridged version of how we always do. For the last 9 years now, IE Sports Radio has continued to bring you the best content, ranging from interviewing legendary athletes to having tailor-made shows dedicated to all major cities around the U.S. We continue to be just a scrappy bunch of podcasters, diehard sports fanatics, just like you, talking about sports, getting you up to date on everything in the sports world, in our regions, in our particular sports. We thank you for your support. Ways that you can follow along with the station. Of course, IE Sports Radio is available on all of the major social platforms. TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, for as long as Twitter continues to exist and be a place that we actually want to go. You can find us at IE Sports Radio. This show is available for you as well on Twitter at IESRC, or if you want to follow along with me personally, I am at Adam_Karnick on Twitter. I should be adding in some other of those socials here. I really should do it now, but I'll let you know when I do, so you can follow along with me there on some of the other social platforms. And if you are listening live here on Spreaker on this Monday evening, hop on into the chat room. It is free. It doesn't cost you anything. Make a username. We can interact and have a good back and forth that way. Larry B is already in the chat room. Taryn Rodriguez, Mike Pat are in here as well. Good evening, gentlemen. I hope you're all having a good evening. Or if you're listening later on as a podcast, whether it's iHeartRadio, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, Google Podcasts, YouTube, however it is that you are, however it is you are absorbing our content, I thank you for doing so. Spread the word. Let your friends know. Pass this along. Let's help this to grow. I'm going to take a quick peek into the chat room besides just to see who's here. Taryn bringing up bring up my bold prediction of the Untouchables NVA volleyball team. Unfortunately, not only did they not win, they also failed to show up. Somebody saying that the Untouchables should change their name to the Unreliables. Taryn, I know you've got some more news on that than I do. That'll be coming up in Set Point right after us. But where we have to start tonight is, of course, the huge news that has just, it was a bombshell on Friday when the university tried its very best to hide it as best as they can. Now it has gone basically nuclear at this point. Pat Fitzgerald is out as the head football coach of the Northwestern University Wildcats after news broke over the weekend that he was allowing a culture of hazing to occur in the football team. And before you say hazing, well, that happens everywhere on every team at every level. Let's take a look at just exactly what has been alleged to occur. And I'm going to preface this by saying that the university hired a law firm to investigate. They interviewed over 50 members of the university, whether it be football players or other staff, current and also former. This stems from a former player who was anonymous until earlier today. Some other members of the football team basically outed him. But before you go and say, hey, hazing happens everywhere, here's essentially what's been alleged. The hazing that was going on, there was a system in place that the seniors, the elder statesmen on the team, referred to as running. And I just realized I forgot to push the explicit button for this episode. I'm going to preface this right now. The details that we're going to get into are going to be somewhat graphic and are definitely going to be of a sexual nature. If you are listening to this story and you have discerning ears nearby, perhaps take a moment to pause this podcast now or to put on headphones. Or if you are someone that is susceptible to such stories, definitely take that under advisement and do what is appropriate for you. And Taryn timing into the chat that he can fix that. Yes, please do put an explicit on this episode, please. I want to have that out there for everybody. Okay, we've got the explicit tag on there now. Thank you, Taryn. I appreciate that. There was a program in place that was referred to as running, and what would occur if a player was selected to be run, it would be upperclassmen, seniors, who would select a freshman that had struggled in practice, had made mistakes in practice. They would select that player. They would then, after practice, seclude the player in a darkened locker room. There would be 8 to 10 seniors who would put on masks. The whistleblower described the masks as being Purge-like from the film franchise The Purge. So have that image in your head. And they would restrain the player, either physically holding him or tying him back, and they would dry hump the player for however long they saw fit. And they would do this to however many freshmen they determined had made enough mistakes. And there were other practices going on as well, ranging from sexually explicit in, they set up what they would refer to as a car wash, where they would have a player bar the entrance to the showers. This player would be naked and would spin like the brushes you would see in an automated car wash, and you would have to rub up against that player in order to gain access into the showers. They had naked bear crawling, where they would make players crawl through the locker room stripped of clothes. They forced a freshman quarterback and a freshman center to do the center quarterback hike from under center while both players were naked. And then the last one on the list is probably the compared to all those, this is the least offensible. They had a Gatorade shake challenge where they would require participants to down as many Gatorades as they could in a span of about 10 minutes. And according to the whistleblower, he never saw anybody participate in the Gatorade shake challenge that didn't then throw up. And reportedly there was one player who, for several days after that, was still having digestive problems as a result. So some very, very, very serious allegations. So the university on Friday announced that Coach Fitzgerald was going to be suspended for 2 weeks. That the whistleblower brought this to the university's attention in November of 2022. The university hired a law firm to come in and investigate. After the law firm completed its investigation, they determined that Coach Fitzgerald did not know the details of the hazing that was going on, but was in a position to know that hazing was going on and didn't do anything about it. So basically, to put it in layman's terms, he was willfully ignorant, according to the report, that he didn't know about it because he was choosing to avoid it as much as he could. He was in a position he should have known exactly what was going on. And in fact, the whistleblower, who then the report from the university comes out last Friday that Coach Fitzgerald was getting suspended for 2 weeks. Then on Saturday, the Daily Northwestern, the on-campus student newspaper, released an article with quotes from the whistleblower. They had interviewed the whistleblower directly for the story, and that's where all the details of the hazing came out from the story from the Daily over the weekend. He also said, the whistleblower said that Coach Fitzgerald, while he may not have known exactly what was going on, the way players were chosen for this, the seniors who did it were referred to as Shrek, as Shrek's List. The way you would get nominated for Shrek's List is they would do a slow clap over their head, and they would refer to it as the Shrek clap. Allegedly, from the whistleblower, and there were a couple of other players then who were also quoted anonymously who corroborated the whistleblower's story, Coach Fitzgerald participated in the Shrek clap, that he would occasionally in practice eyeball a player that had made the mistake and then begin slow clapping over his head and, quote, having a mischievous, menacing smile on his face. And then the team would pick up on that and begin clapping. So according to the whistleblower, while Fitzgerald may not have known details, he certainly knew something was going on because he allegedly helped identify targets for the program. ESPN then came out with a report of its own on Sunday, which quoted a lot of the same story from the Daily that Northwestern had put out the day before. But interestingly enough, then in the ESPN story, they cited a player who also chose to remain anonymous, but a current player who came to Fitzgerald's defense and said that he had not seen some of the more inflammatory things that the whistleblower had pointed out. For example, the whistleblower talked about that there was a whiteboard in the locker room that was labeled Shrek's List with names on it, and they had times where this running would have occurred. They had Runsgiving and Runsmas for Thanksgiving and Christmas time to have these runs occur. This other player then in the ESPN article refuted that and said a current player, had never observed those things. So there is a little bit of both sides being reported here. So also if you're one that says, oh, these are anonymous sources, you can't trust them, there's also an anonymous source from ESPN that is refuting it. Then earlier today, a fresh story came out from the Daily that with fresh allegations, including that there was a culture of racism and systemic cultural insensitivity that was allowed on campus. I'm gonna try and find that story here because I apologize for not having it up right away. I thought I had it tagged in one spot, and instead I have it tagged in another. So I apologize while I get this up. But if you're someone that does not want to, that only wants to consider sources that are willing to go on the record, well, this is from the Daily Northwestern from earlier today. The headline is former Northwestern University players describe racist environment in the football program. There are 3 former players who played from the mid to late 2000s, and the first one goes on record. Ramon Diaz Jr., a Latino offensive lineman from 2005 to 2008, quote, said his experience on the football team was hostile as a non-white player. I'm going to quote him a little bit here. Quote, I didn't feel like I could be anything other than white. We never felt like we could be ourselves. We had to fit in by being white or acting white or laughing at our own people. And the story goes on to describe situations like players who wore dreadlocks were told they needed to get rid of them, that the phrase good, clean American fun was used often by coaches to reference how they wanted players to look and act. There's another quote in here from another offensive lineman who said that there was a coach that was talking about wanting to have a clean room, looked at the player and said, well, you know what I'm talking about. Your folks had to have cleaned houses, right? So that story came out earlier today. And then as a result of all this, earlier tonight, the Northwestern's president announced that head coach Pat Fitzgerald and the university are parting ways. Michael Schill, the president of Northwestern University, released a statement announcing that Pat Fitzgerald will no longer be the head coach. So, wow. A lot to take in there in an incredibly short amount of time. This was 72 hours from, or just over 72 hours basically from the coach being suspended for generic hazing to he is gone, and there's an entire culture of sexual abuse and cultural insensitivity on Northwestern University that now apparently in the football program needs to be scrubbed clean. Wow, this is just a lot to go through very quickly. One of the first takeaways and thoughts that I have from this is just, it can happen anywhere. That we've heard stories of athletes and students and programs sacrificing integrity and morality for the sake of winning. This is Northwestern. Northwestern was supposed to be the place where, yes, we are in the Big Ten. Yes, we are a Division I program. Yes, we take pride in our effort, but we also are very selective in who we choose to represent the university, and the university always wants to put the president. President Schill even said he wants to put the student athletes first. And then there's this that comes out, and Coach Fitzgerald has been with the team for 17 seasons. He's an alumnus of not just the school, but of the football team. You would think if anybody would be able to be in lockstep with the vision and message of the university, it would be Coach Fitzgerald. So that's that's my first takeaway. That's my first thought. If it can happen anywhere. One of the final nails, or one of the more, also another intriguing twist that came out of all of this. Also, I forgot to mention this, or there were so many things to keep track of with this story. It also came out, CBS reported earlier tonight that Northwestern University is now being named in a class action lawsuit being brought up in an attempt to force the NCAA to drop the student athlete title for the players. And one of the arguments that was being made in the lawsuit by the person, Michael Sue, who's bringing the lawsuit forward to the National Labor Board, part of his argument was if these young men would have been viewed by the university as employees instead of students, would that have changed anything? Would this have been allowed to happen if these were employees instead of students? That's going to be a fascinating turn for this. Unfortunately, cynically, I think the answer ultimately would be no. The same thing would have been allowed to occur. We've seen situations like this occur at other schools. Heck, I mean, this isn't even the first Big Ten university to go through this in the last 15 years. Michigan State and Penn State, of course, have gone through their troubles and their problems where horrible acts were allowed to occur and a blind eye was turned, all in the name of, well, we're winning. Well, this is what it takes in order to win. In this case, it seems to be a system of, I went through this, I survived it. It's a rite of passage. This is what, if you want to play football at Northwestern, these are things you're just going to have to put up with. And then you suffer through it. And then in 3 years' time, it'll be your turn to get to be on the good side of it. It's a hard story, for sure. We'll see what continues to fall out from it. I was planning, honestly, to try and give a little more, maybe not necessarily opinion on the story, but try to give a little bit of meat behind the bones of just the facts of the story. But there were just so many new details coming up. I mean, the story changed today four times in the span of just of just 1 day's worth of news. But a hard story out of Evanston, and it's not done yet. I mean, we'll see what other fallout there could be from this. We'll see if anything happens with the athletic director. We will see if any of the other coaches wind up getting released. I believe the university has announced who is going to be taking over as head coach. Let me see if I can get that real fast. I do believe. Okay. Also, within the last couple of hours, the associate athletic director, Paul Kennedy, has left the university as well. So there is just continuing fallout. Now, Paul Kennedy is leaving to become vice president of sports communications for the Big Ten Conference as a whole. We'll see if there's any blowback or anything happens from that. There's a lot going on. This is an evolving story, to say the least. So it's definitely something we'll be keeping an eye on over the next couple of weeks as this plays out. I hope it does not go as far as this, but right now this feels like Penn State light right now in the university. We are going to take a quick break, and then I promise I'm going to try to do my best to lighten the mood a little bit. We will talk some baseball, and then we're going to try to have some fun before we get out of here tonight. Try to get some of that taste out of our mouths a little bit. You are listening to Chi-Town Weekly here on IE Sports Radio, your direct feed for all that is sports.
Hello, sports fans. It's me, your boy Larry B, and I want to walk you through the world of sports. No, not just the mainstream major TV deal type sports, although those are important too. But let me be your guide through your journey of all sports, from college to the pros, the minors, and everything in between. Each week, we are talking sports galore with true diehards just like you from a hardcore fan's perspective that's sure to quench your thirst around leagues you may know all too well and some you may even discover here. That's right, sports fans. If you love sports of all kinds, enjoy hearing amazing sports stories, and respect all sports because you know how difficult any of them can be to play or compete in, then this is your show. Join me, your boy Larry B, on the defining moment each week here on IE Sports Radio, your direct feed for all that is sports, and let the sports come to you.
What's good, everyone? It's Drewski, the host of Heart of Texas Sports on IE Sports Radio, your direct feed for all that is sports. On this station, we cover everything in the Dallas-Fort Worth, Texas area. From we cover the Dallas Cowboys, the Dallas Stars, Dallas Mavericks, Dallas Wings, Texas Rangers, TCU, SMU, we cover it all right here every Wednesdays from 9 to 10 p.m. Central Time. Make sure you stay live with me on the Heart of Texas Sports on IE Sports Radio, your direct feed for all that is sports.
Hey sports fans, do you like wine? Well, we've got the show for you. This is Let's Wine About Sports, a show where we talk about wine and sports simultaneously. From the classic Cabernet Sauvignon all the way down to the grapes that you've never even heard of before. Oh yeah, we cover it all. And we'll talk about a little bit of sports as well. Football, hockey, collegiate, women's sports, it doesn't matter. We're going to talk about it all, and we're going to whine about it all. So join me Monday at 8 p.m. on IE Sports Radio, your direct feed for all that is sports.
All right. Welcome to AZ Sports Daily, I'm your host, Kieran Daly, bringing the heat to Arizona sports. There's no discrimination here. We're going to talk about every sports team, professional and college. The show is all about you, the listener. I'm here to entertain you. Are you not entertained? Is this not why you are here? It's going to be fun, high energy. You may not agree with what I say. That's okay. Let me hear you. Let's talk about it. Join me every Wednesday, 8 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, right here on AZ Sports Daily. That's AZ Sports, Daly, and at IE Sports Radio, your direct feed for all that is sports.
What up, Boston sports fans? This is Mikey Two Guns here, your host of Our Bleeping City, airing every Wednesday night from 7 to 8 p.m. right here on IE Sports Radio, your direct feed for all that is sports. Please join me. We'll talk everything Boston sports, all the local teams, college teams. I'm even down to talk MMA, boxing, whatever you guys want. So join me every Wednesday night, 7 to 8 p.m. Chime in with your questions on the chat, tweet the show. We'll even have call-ins. I can't wait to hear from you guys. This is going to be a lot of fun. So once again, it's Our Bleeping City. I am your host, Mikey Two Guns, every Wednesday night from 7 to 8 p.m. right here on IE Sports Radio, your direct feed for all that is sports. See you soon, people.
And welcome back into Chi-Town Weekly here on IE Sports Radio, your direct feed for all that is sports. Going back through the chat room there as we were doing that little bit of an ad break, want to address a couple of things from in the chat room there before we temporarily close the book on the Northwestern football story. Mike Pat asked in the chat room there, is this going to be the death penalty for Northwestern football? All right. I'm going to probably show a little bit of, I can't think of a better word to use. I'm probably going to show a little bit of prejudice in the way I answer this. Certainly some cynicism. If Penn State still has a flipping football team after what those monsters were allowed to do for years, I don't think any football program is going to get killed. I think it's literally impossible at this point for the NCAA to kill a football program because there's just too much damn money, even for a school like Northwestern, because it's in the Big Ten. It's one of the major conferences. It's it's a cash cow, even though Northwestern itself doesn't have the history of other programs. But if what happened there in Penn State, in Happy Valley, wasn't enough to kill a football program, I would be shocked if this is enough to kill a football program. Not to say that it shouldn't. Personally, I'd have no problem with it at this point if they were to say, you know what, we need to clear the air. We need to sit down. We need to reevaluate, reassess, and say, you know what? Northwestern as a universe, I would love for this to be the end result. I know it'll never happen, but I'll live in fairy tale land for a minute here. I'll allow myself to. I would love for President Schill to step forward and say, you know what? We screwed this up. From trying to just slap Coach Fitzgerald on the wrist with a 2-week suspension in the middle of July when nothing's going on anyway, and announcing the news on a Friday in the hopes that everybody would miss it and it would just all blow over and nothing else would happen, to where we are now. We, as a university, have screwed up. And so what we are going to do to fix this is we are going to suspend our football program. Maybe not forever. Maybe for 4 years. Enough so that everybody that's in the program right now can cycle out. The transfer portal is wide open. Players are able to move. It's a lot easier to move around now as a collegiate athlete than it was even 5 years ago. We're going to work with the NCAA to, work with the NCAA. God, really, I am living in a fairy tale, aren't I? Golly. We're going to work with the NCAA and get these players to other programs so that they still have an opportunity to play. So that you're not having players that haven't done anything wrong, because not everybody's an aggressor here in this. I'm sure there are some people that are purely victims and some that were victims and are now aggressors. We're going to work with those. We're going to work with the aggressors to get them the counseling and support they need so that they can understand why what they did was so heinous and so wrong. And then we're just not going to have football for 4 years. We're going to allow this to cycle through, and then we're going to come back. And then we're going to have some very strict guidelines about what goes on in sports, in football at this university. They've already said that they're going to have somebody monitoring the locker rooms that doesn't report to the coaching staff. That they're going to have somebody on hand to watch the players while they're in the locker rooms to make sure that everything's on the up and up. That's a nice first step. I'd love them to go further. I'd love for them to say, we need to wash our hands. We need a cleansing from this. I'd love that to be the end result. I know it's not going to happen. There's too much money to be made in football, even for a school like Northwestern, that if you shut down the football program, then so many of your athletic programs you just won't have the funding for. You just won't have the money for. There won't be the support there because your donors are going to leave. Your boosters are going to say, well, if you're not going to have football, then I'm canceling my check. And the NCAA is not going to do anything to help them with it either. So that I'd love for there to be some kind of message to be sent that this is not okay. But unfortunately, I think the Penn State story showed us that as long as the dollars keep trickling in, anything's permissible. So that's my thought there, Mike, on whether or not they should get the death penalty for this. I also do want to give some kudos to the student journalists over at the Daily Northwestern for reporting this. As Michael David Smith, part of at least one time of Pro Football Talk, pointed out on Twitter, when you're a student working for the student paper and you say anything bad about the football team, you put a gigantic target on your back as a young reporter, and that can be incredibly intimidating. And the reporters there at the Daily Northwestern, kudos to them for having the guts to report it and to write the stories and publish the stories. So kudos to them. Whew. All right. I promised that we were going to lighten things up. I look at the clock and I see, wow, this is kind of what I figured would happen. This is most of the episode. I don't want this to be totally a doom and gloom episode. We're going to keep up with this story. We're going to keep up with this story. We're going to definitely keep up with and follow and not stop talking about this story. But I do want to lighten things up a little bit. We'll briefly talk some baseball, and then we'll allow that to segue in to some of the fun station-wide assignment for the week. So we've reached the All-Star break in MLB. If you're a White Sox fan, thank God we made it this far. You now have permission to just tune out. You watch Luis Robert take part in the home run derby tonight, and then tune out. Just tune out for the rest of the season. It's okay. I saw it reported earlier today by 670 The Score. I believe it was James Fegan came on and said that basically the White Sox are open for business. Yeah, that basically the White Sox are open for business. That there are 4 untouchable, untradeable four players on the White Sox that are non-starters for a trade. So, Mike, Pat, I know you're always wanting to play fantasy GM here. Here are 4 players you can't have from the White Sox. You can't have Luis Robert. You cannot have Dylan Cease. You are not allowed to have Eloy Jimenez. And then oh gosh, I lost the 4th one. I lost the 4th player. I apologize, but there are 4 untouchables: Luis Robert, Dylan Cease, Eloy Jimenez. Andrew Vaughn. Andrew Vaughn is the 4th player, untouchable. Otherwise, the White Sox are open for business and are willing to hear offers. And why not? Yes, the American League Central is a crap show. 500 is literally good enough to lead the division, but the White Sox are 16 under at this point, and they are 8 games back. Close the door on them. They're done. Cubs on the mean hand, after coming back from London, they had 13 games in 13 days. It didn't go great. They got swept by the Phillies, dropped 2 out of 3 to the Guardians, split with the Brewers, but they did take 2 out of 3 from the Yankees. It's the first time ever that the Cubs won, not just a series, won a game in the Bronx, new or old Yankee Stadium. Friday night was the first time ever that the Chicago Cubs won a game in Yankee Stadium against the Yankees. And then they wound up taking 2 out of 3. So as they sit here, they are 42-47, 3rd place in the National League Central, 7 games out of first place. Yet they're still the only team in the division with a positive run differential. So the Reds just the Reds had a crazy June, just an insane June and early July. Milwaukee's right there. It'll be very interesting to see what the Cubs do. All reports seem to be that they want to be buyers. They have announced that they intend to buy, they want to buy. It's a question of should they buy at this point. So we'll continue to keep our eye on that. But that series against the Brewers over the 4th of July was a lot of fun too. That was that was a good time. I enjoyed having some good back and forth there with Big Cheese Sports. You can hear him on Sunday afternoons. We were having some fun back and forth during that series as the Cubs and the Brewers split that 4-game series in a wild series. It was there. Some good fun there. But the American League, to kind of segue here, the American League Central is just a joke of a division. It is total trash. The Guardians are 45-45, and they are in first place, and not like tied for first place. They stand alone in first place. It's only a half game, but still, to be 500 and to be alone in first place in a division is kind of sickening, kind of gross, kind of yuck. That's going to segue a little bit here into something that every show across the station is doing this week here on IE Sports Radio. We are doing realignment of the sports landscape, kind of a what if. And in Major League Baseball, we have a realignment that was done on WordPress by Divine Right, how the sports world would look if I were king, where he lists a map here stolen from sportinfo.yolasite.com. And basically we redivide the entire league up. I love how Kieran from Arizona put it last night on his show. You have the California division. You have the Giants, the A's, the Dodgers, the Angels, the Padres, and then the Mariners because they've got to go somewhere. You have kind of a centralized division of Arizona, Colorado, Kansas City, St. Louis, the Rangers, and the Astros. You have everything but Northeast division of the Nationals, the Reds, the Braves, the Rays, and the Marlins. You have a truly Northeast division of the Blue Jays, the Pirates, the Phillies, the Yankees, the Mets, and the Red Sox. And then for our purposes, you have the new, we'll call it North Central division, the Twins, the Tigers, the Guardians, the Brewers, the Cubs, and the White Sox. My initial thought is the only two teams that would be worth a damn in this division would be the Brewers and the Cubs. The Twins and the Guardians would stick around and make things interesting, but they wouldn't be good enough to actually threaten for anything. The Tigers would exist. The Sox would exist. And it would be the Cubs and the Brewers more often than not that would be competing for that. So that'd be kind of fun. I would kind of enjoy that. The NBA, which this is a map done by a Reddit user, CSIRL. It puts the Bucks, the Bulls, the Pacers, the Pistons, and the Cavs in their own division. Frankly, for the NBA, divisions are so irrelevant that align them however you want. The nobody in the NBA talks about winning a division crown. Nobody talks about the importance of winning a division or, oh man, you got a divisional game coming up. You talk about your conference opponents. So as long as the conference itself is remaining effectively unchanged, which basically it is, looking at this map, Memphis would be in the West, which, check me guys, honestly, my NBA is not great. I believe they're already in the West. I don't think they're in the East, the Memphis Grizzlies. You're leaving the conferences the same. So that, to me, I'm fine with. You want to have that how you have that, that's fine. The NHL one comes courtesy of Gamehaus, the German spelling. Zach Puplis and I will have more to discuss about this tomorrow on the Neutral Zone. Suffice to say that it's a division that would look very familiar to Hawks fans. It's St. Louis, Minnesota, and Winnipeg. They're already in a division together. Basically, what this map does is really you create a ton of really tiny divisions rather than having a small group of large divisions. Sure, I'm fine with it. St. Louis and Chicago is an amazing rivalry. I am sad about losing the Predators as a rival, but we'll talk more about that at another time. We'll talk more about that tomorrow. Major college football, frankly, it feels like that's just going to a 2-conference setup anyway, that you're going to have the SEC and the Big Ten, and just everybody's going to be in those. I did like how Kiernan last night talked about how they really, for college especially, they should take the travel into consideration when they're creating these things. I love that. That's one of my biggest beefs with USC and UCLA joining the Big Ten is, my God, they've got to fly everywhere, a long way to get anywhere to play anybody in their conference at that point. That's kind of ridiculous. But again, the almighty dollar is going to win out. So let that be what it is. And then the NFL map is kind of an interesting one. It's left over from a summer project the league did to celebrate Earth Day. They realigned the entire league to have as short of travel as possible for all the teams to cut back on the league's carbon footprint, basically, is the idea behind this map. And you've got some interesting moves there all around. But for our purposes, we're going to focus on just the Bears division. The Vikings and Packers would still be division rivals. They would lose the Lions, and they would gain the Chiefs. Me no likey that trade. I don't want to have to deal with Patrick Mahomes twice a year for the next 10 years. Thank you very much. I'd much rather keep Jared Goff in the division for the next however long he remains upright, and then inevitably we go to Hendon Hooker, and we have to deal with whatever that is for the Lions. I'd much rather deal with that, plus Jordan Love, plus the Kirk Cousins experiment that just won't go away in Minnesota. I'd much rather deal with that, 6 times a year, 8 times a year, than deal with Patrick Mahomes any more than once every 4 years. So me no likey that one bit at all. I do not like that trade one bit. But still, there's some interesting maps, some interesting things to see there. Let me know your thoughts. Hit me up on Twitter at IESRC, or you can follow me at Adam_Karnick. That does it for the show tonight. This was a wild one. This was, wow, a lot to keep up with all throughout the show. Thank you for making it through this with me as I'm seeing people react to my thoughts of the Bears being in a division with the Kansas City Chiefs and dealing with Patrick Mahomes. I'm glad I was able. I'm glad we were able to get there, have a few laughs before we got out of here tonight. I'm glad for that. Thank you to Larry B for all the hard work you do behind the scenes of the station, sir. It definitely is noticed, and it definitely is appreciated. Thank you to everybody hanging out in the chat room tonight. Larry B, Bishop, Mike Pat, Mike C, Taryn Rodriguez, Shane hopping into the chat room there towards the very end. Thank you to everybody. I know this was a little bit harder of a show to get through, but we made it through. We're going to keep on this Northwestern story. We're not done with it yet. Be sure to stick around, though. Coming up right after us, it'll be Taryn Rodriguez on Set Point. He was at the National Volleyball Association final regular season match, if you will. Did the Chicago Untouchables, did they make me look smart, or did they make me look like an idiot? Spoiler alert, it wasn't the first option. We will have a full breakdown there, plus a preview then of the NVA playoffs, plus all kinds of other stuff going on in the volleyball world. That's coming up right after us. Coming up for me next, you will hear me tomorrow night on the Neutral Zone with Zach Puplis. We will be reacting to the realigned NHL map. There's some football news that broke into the hockey world earlier today that we'll be talking about, plus all sorts of our regular stuff. Otherwise, we'll see you next week. Everybody be safe, be healthy. We'll see you next time.